Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. If you were to imagine which animal or creature was making that sound, you would probably think of a bird, because that is what a chirp sounds like. But as the name of this episode would suggest, that is the wrong answer. This is in fact the sound of a cheetah chirping. The thing is that cheetahs can make a wide range of sounds. They can chirp, as we just heard. They can also yelp, purr, meow, and growl. And you can hear some of those sounds in this clip. Now, the reason, of course, that we are talking about the fastest land mammal is because on Saturday, which was also Prime Minister Narendra Modi's birthday, 8 cheetahs arrived in India from Namibia. They were put on a 10-hour flight that flew 8,000 kilometers, and then the 8 of them were brought to the Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh. And this is noteworthy for 2 reasons. One is that something like this has never happened before. A large carnivore has never been relocated from one continent to another. And the second is that cheetahs have returned to India after they were first declared extinct 70 years ago.
आज भारत की धरती पर चीता लौट आए हैं और मैं ये भी कहूंगा कि इन चीतों के साथ ही भारत की प्रकृति प्रेमी चेतना भी पूरी शक्ति से जागृत हो उठी है। मैं इस ऐतिहासिक अवसर पर सभी देशवासियों को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं।
In this episode, we talk about the main objective behind bringing these cheetahs to India, the concerns that experts have raised about this project, and what people near the Kuno National Park think of it. And for this, we first speak to Indian Express's Esha Roy. Esha, could you begin by talking about when we first heard about this project and what is the main aim behind it?
So the cheetah reintroduction project in India, there has been thought on it for a couple of decades now. But the recent attempt started in 2009 when the Indian government seriously started looking at bringing back the cheetah. However, what happened was that the Asiatic lion translocation program from Gir National Park in Gujarat was also being simultaneously conceptualized. But since Gujarat state refused permission to allow the lion to be translocated, there were all these national parks that had already been vetted for the transfer of the lion. So the Supreme Court in 2020 finally gave permission for these parks that had been vetted for the lion to be used to relocate the African cheetah instead.
Okay, so they basically wanted to shift some of the lions from the Gir National Park to other areas in India.
Yes, and particularly to Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh, which is where the cheetah has been brought now. And that's why Kuno was an ideal location for bringing the cheetah because it had already been prepared to receive the Asiatic lions.
Okay, and the thing is that cheetahs used to be found in India, and their population was actually widespread until they were declared extinct in 1952. What do we know about that period for cheetahs in the country?
Yeah, I mean, the cheetah was actually very widespread in India, barring the Himalayas in the north and the coastal regions in the east and west. The entire central India, from top to bottom, was actually the cheetah's habitat. So from Lucknow and Jaipur in the north, all the way down to Mysore in the south, and from the Kathiawar Peninsula in Gujarat in the west, all the way to Deoghar in Orissa in the east. So it had a very large historic range in the country. And the word cheetah, I believe, also originates from a Sanskrit word chitrak, which means the spotted one. And there are Neolithic cave paintings in Madhya Pradesh, I believe, of the cheetah that have been found.
And then what was the reason that cheetahs went extinct in India?
Yes, so the cheetah was prime game for both officials of the British Raj as well as the Indian royalty in different parts of the country. The immediate reason why the cheetah went extinct is the last three Asiatic cheetahs were hunted and then shot by the Maharaja Ramanuj Pratap Singh Deo of Korea in Madhya Pradesh. Soon after, in 1952, the Indian government declared the cheetah extinct in the country. So human activity, including hunting, has been one of the main reasons why the cheetah went extinct. There are other contributing reasons as well. Alongside the cheetah, its prey like the black buck or the sambal or the cheetal, antelopes, gazelles, these were also being hunted and their numbers were also depleting. So the cheetah's prey base was diminishing in India, as well as its habitat, which was becoming fragmented because in the 30s, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, India was moving towards urbanization, especially under the British Raj. So, with the construction of roads and rail tracks, as well as the focus on agriculture. So, the shift of the economy towards agriculture meant that more and more forested land was being deforested, acquired, and converted to agricultural land. And that's how the cheetah, as well as its prey, lost a lot of its habitat in the country. So these were contributing factors as well.
And so now, what is the main objective behind bringing these cheetahs to India? Is it just because they want cheetahs to return to India?
Not at all. So many critics have called the project a vanity project of the government of India. But the wildlife experts who are involved in the project have emphasized that bringing back the cheetah will restore India's historic evolutionary balance. What this basically means is that the animal has in the past been native to India and has also been at the top of the pyramid in a lot of the landscapes. And with its extinction, these landscapes have degraded. For instance, Project Tiger, when Project Tiger was launched, and now it's been over 25 years, we're coming around to 30 years of Project Tiger. What that project has done has not only increased the number of tigers in the country and preserved and conserved the species, but the entire ecosystem that these tigers live in have been preserved and conserved.
Okay, so the idea is when you try to save the tiger, for example, then you will also ensure that it has enough prey to eat and it has enough of a forest habitat to live in. So by just trying to save the cat on the top of the food chain, you are protecting everything around it.
Right, correct. So you protect the cheetah, then you protect its prey, then you protect the landscape and you protect the water bodies in the landscape. So you'll end up protecting that entire region. So it becomes like a movement. And government sources are fed into the project, government focus is fed into the project. There are awareness campaigns that run in the community. So it really becomes a flagship species and these regions become extremely well preserved.
Okay, so apart from preserving ecology, what other objective does this project have?
Other than that, I think it would be wrong and slightly naive to look at the cheetah project as just being India specific. I mean, if you look at Africa, where, the cheetah in media and just in common belief, the cheetah is always identified with Africa. But in large parts of Africa, the cheetah disappeared for similar reasons that it disappeared in India because of hunting and poaching and fragmentation of its habitat. So in Africa, they started a similar cheetah translocation project in the late 1990s, which really picked up steam in 2005, 2006. And what they did was from Namibia, which still has, along with Botswana, the largest population of cheetahs in Africa. So each country has 1,500 individual cheetahs each. From Namibia, they translocated a handful of African cheetahs to South Africa, where it had depleted and disappeared. And with this meta-population project, the numbers in South Africa have actually increased to about 500 individuals, which has actually led to a different problem, which is that the female cheetahs are producing 5-6 cubs each annually, and they anticipate that this is going to lead to a population explosion of cheetahs, which may in turn lead to a decimation of its prey and therefore an unbalanced ecosystem. So Professor Adrian Tordif, who's with the University of Pretoria and heads this cheetah project for South Africa, he was talking to me and he said that what they will have to do if the cheetah is not relocated from Africa and from South Africa in particular is that they'll have to put these female cheetahs on contraceptives, which is extremely tragic. And once they put the cheetahs on contraceptives, they will not really know the impact of the contraceptives. After a certain period, when they stop the contraceptive, will the female cheetah be able to reproduce again? That is not known because it's never been done. So that would have been a really tragic outcome, not just because of the decimation of prey that the cheetahs will land up doing if the population explodes, but also because there's no longer any space. For instance, there are 50 reserves in South Africa and there's no space to keep them. So this population has to go somewhere.
Right. So apart from benefiting local wildlife ecosystems, the idea is that this project is also part of a global effort to conserve the cheetah, especially considering that it is a vulnerable species and there is less than 7,500 cheetahs globally. Now, we mentioned earlier that this kind of translocation has never happened before. A large carnivore has never been relocated to another continent. So could you talk about how these cheetahs were picked and the precautions that were followed by the officials?
So the cheetahs were identified for the translocation depending on their age, their health, their ability to hunt. The cheetahs that were selected are very young. They're between 2.5 to 6 years old, all 8 cheetahs. So their adaptability was expected to be higher. Before they made the journey, of course, they have been prepared for the past month. They've been put through a battery of medical tests, a blood test to check and see whether they have diseases or not, so that they would not be carrying any kind of parasitic load from Africa to India. All the cheetahs have had 2-3 rounds of vaccination, and they've also been radio collared so that when they are let out into Kuno National Park, the officials can monitor them constantly till they adapt completely to the region.
Right, and we know that the flight they took, modifications were made to that as well so that they could arrive safely. But when we talk about the Kuno National Park where they have arrived, you mentioned that it was picked because it was already prepared for the Asiatic lion. But were there other reasons that Kuno was picked as well?
So there were 6 sites which were actually identified for the lion. And these 6 sites were again reassessed by the Wildlife Institute of India to see which would be best to relocate the cheetah in. Because the lion and the cheetah share the same sort of habitat and landscape, which is a grassland and semi-forested scrub landscapes. So whatever the habitat that would be suitable for a lion would therefore logically be suitable for the cheetah as well. So for Kuno, the Madhya Pradesh government was very active, having expected the Asiatic lion. So they had already invested a great deal of resources into prepping Kuno for the relocation. So what they had done was they had ensured that the anthropogenic pressure on the park was very little.
And what do they mean when they say anthropogenic pressure?
Well, human habitat and human activity, right? So there were 25 villages in the area, and 24 of these 25 villages had already been relocated and the people rehabilitated by the state government in expectation of the lion. There's just one village left called Bakcha, which has a population of 148 people. And the MP government is now looking at relocating this village as well. So the park had already been semi-sanitized. And with the landscape being similar to that of Namibia and South Africa, the climate, the rainfall level, there are a lot of similarities between Namibia and this particular region in Madhya Pradesh, which is why it was felt that the cheetah would find it easy to adapt here. And Kuno also has a very healthy prey base in terms of gazelles, antelopes, foxes, and they just organically have a very healthy prey base. And to ensure that the cheetah doesn't have any kind of problems, the Environment Ministry, along with the MP government, has also introduced 700 more herbivores to the area, including nilgai, wild pig, langur, peafowls, animals that the cheetah would typically prey on.
Yes, and experts even say that cheetah is the kind of animal that can adapt in extreme climates. For example, it can live in coastal regions, wooded savannas, mountain habitats, and even snow deserts, apart from, of course, grasslands. But what do experts say will be the biggest challenges for the cheetahs in Kuno?
Well, some critics have raised the issue of the span of the area of Kuno National Park, which is 748 square kilometers, and have said that Namibia has wide expanses of grassland. The national park is 748 kilometers, but outside of the park, the forested area and the grasslands span to about 6,800 square kilometers, in which the cheetah will have its range. It's connected to other parks. In Rajasthan and in Madhya Pradesh, there are animal corridors that the cheetah can travel through. So the main issue that the cheetah is likely to face is that of poaching, because this region is known for poachers. There are particular tribes like the Saharias or the Mogias, which are traditionally known to be engaged in this kind of activity. They are poor tribes with very little other options. So that the officials will have to ensure that any sort of poaching does not take place. That would be the main concern. The second concern would be creating awareness amongst villagers, although most of the villages have been removed. But cheetah is not, unlike a tiger or lion, is not an aggressive animal. In a flight or fight situation, they would choose flight over fight. So they are unlikely to attack humans. But what they are likely to attack, if they have access to, is livestock. And one of the major threats they face in Africa, and therefore they're anticipated to face in India, is from farmers trying to protect their livestock. So that is something that the government needs to be aware of. The government is already taking measures to ensure that this conflict is very little, but it's something that will have to be monitored.
And I suppose for that, the officials will have to ensure that there is enough prey base so that the cheetahs don't attack the livestock.
Correct, that the prey base is maintained and continue to be maintained over the next 10, 15, 20 odd years. Yes. Incidentally, the officials in Madhya Pradesh have already finished vaccinating the cattle, the livestock, and the feral dogs in the area in case the cheetah does attack them, so that the cheetah doesn't get any diseases.
Okay, so apart from poaching and animal-human conflict, the other thing that experts have raised concerns about is the genetic diversity of these cheetahs, because we are hoping that the population of these cheetahs grow in India. So what are the concerns there?
Yes, I mean, this has been a major issue and concern raised by critics and wildlife experts who have been opposed to the idea of bringing the cheetah. They have said, for a genetic flow, for that to be maintained, you do need a larger population of cheetah. And genetic flow is basically a flow between different subgroups of cheetah, which makes the animal healthier. It prevents inbreeding and therefore prevents a lot of diseases. That's what gene flow basically is. So critics have said with just 8 cheetahs, even if they get a few more over the next couple of years, the group is just too small for there to be a gene flow. So Professor Tordif, again in South Africa, who has been looking at metapopulations across Africa, not just in South Africa, has said this is an issue that they deal with all the time. So the solution that Africa has found is that they move their animals around. So if they send 5 cheetahs to Mozambique, where they have a program running, a couple of years later, they will bring those cheetahs back and take a fresh lot of another 5 or 10 cheetahs to Mozambique and do this back and forth so that the gene flow is maintained. Ministry officials and officials in the National Tiger Conservation Authority in India, however, say that we may not have to do this because Africa doesn't really have, especially across countries, doesn't have animal corridors. India does have a lot of animal corridors. So the cheetahs can move around from one sanctuary to another when the population is established. So we should not have the gene flow problem. But if it does arrive, then we can always adopt what the African countries are doing for their cheetahs.
And Esha, earlier the plan was actually to get 20 cheetahs. So what is the reason that only 8 have come?
Yes, I mean, the plans were afoot and all clearances have been got. The plan was to get 20 this year, 8 from Namibia and 12 cheetahs from South Africa. And all the protocols, actually, there have been experts over the last 1.5 since early 2021. There have been expert teams from both countries who have visited Kuno National Park, who have approved it. They have come here and trained wildlife officials on how to handle the cheetah, given them medical training. Our teams have visited both Namibia and South Africa. So really the anticipation and the expectation was that we will acquire cheetahs from both countries. However, while the bureaucratic process in Namibia went smoothly, we signed an MOU with the government. In South Africa, the Indian side has finished all its protocol, including that by the Ministry of External Affairs. But from what I've been told by sources is that, in typical bureaucratic fashion, the file is stuck with the South African government. Although in principle, even the Environment Minister of South Africa has given sanction to the project, but it still requires a written assent, which the Indian side is waiting for.
Also, we have been talking about cheetahs helping conserve ecosystems. But have there been talks of tourism as well?
Yes, actually, that is one of the goals that the Environment Ministry has, that eventually what can be done is ecotourism can be introduced to the area, which will provide the community surrounding Kuno livelihood options, and it will increase employment. And while this sounds very commercial and sort of very anti-wildlife, it's actually not. This is one of the recommendations that Dr. Laurie Marker has made to the Indian government. She's the executive director and the founder of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. She's one of the world's leading cheetah experts, and she represents the Namibian government in this project. And she has been an advisor to the Indian government on the project for the past 12 years. And she has actually recommended that they definitely begin ecotourism at some point once the cheetahs have adapted, because it's very important that not only does it create awareness and exposure to cheetah and cheetah conservation, but more importantly, it provides the community a livelihood. So there's no antagonism from the community, and they understand and they become stakeholders in the project, and the protection of the cheetah becomes, personal for them as well.
Now, like Esha said, one of the main concerns that experts have when it comes to this project is regarding the animal-human conflict. The cheetahs attacking livestock and the people in turn attacking the cheetah. And for this purpose, the forest officials have designated 400 people who will spread awareness about this big cat. These people are being called Cheetah Mitras. And to know more about these Cheetah Mitras, we speak to Indian Express's Iram Siddique, who recently visited Shopur, the district where the Kuno National Park lies.
So essentially, these cheetah mitras are villagers. Some of them are slightly influential people who have a certain standing in the village. The idea is to rope in these people and convince the villagers that cheetahs, unlike leopards, are not an animal that will cause a lot of harm to humans and livestock. The cheetah mitras will help villagers identify the difference between a leopard and the cheetah, because they are to a certain extent very similar looking animals.
So making sure that they know that cheetahs, for example, have black lines that run from below their eyes to their mouths, and that their spots are different from a leopard, and so is their tail.
So these are the kind of small nuances that these cheetah mitras will help the villagers understand. And also the message is that if at all you encounter a cheetah, instead of attacking the animal and killing it in the process, please inform the cheetah mitra in your village so that he can inform the forest officer and that animal can be taken back to a safe zone.
Now, interestingly, one of the cheetah mitras that the Madhya Pradesh's forest department has roped in is a former dacoit who has over 91 cases of murder and kidnapping to his name, who surrendered in 1984. This is Ramesh Sikharwar. Iram says during his dacoit days, he would actually help people solve disputes.
Whether it is the land dispute, and according to Mr. Ramesh Sikharwar, he is somebody who's done just the right thing because he thinks that justice is often delayed and denied to people. So this is his way of doing instant justice, in the sense that he'll hold a rifle and then you either do the right thing. If somebody has taken over somebody else's land, you give them back. And most of the land there belongs to the Adivasi. So that has been Mr. Ramesh Sikharwar's history. He had absconded for about a good 10 years before finally surrendering and serving his term in prison, and then he was let off.
Iram says that the reason Sikharwar has been roped in is because he is a very influential figure in the community. And plus, officials feel that he is someone who can keep the local poachers in check.
So apart from creating cheetah awareness, he also is trying to sort of convey a message to the poachers. And he told these many words that if they hunt or try to hunt down a cheetah, he will not think twice to pick up his rifle again. He has a licensed rifle given to him by the authorities and everything. So he said, I will take a very stern view if something like that happens. So yeah, that's Mr. Ramesh Sikarwar for you.
And besides these cheetah mitras, the officials are also taking help of a community radio to help spread awareness, especially because community radios are very popular in the area.
Because not every household has a television set, and even if some people do, electricity is very erratic. So accessibility is either through cell phone, you watch news on the cell phone, or mostly people listen to radio. So about 10 days ago, they started a program. There is an RJ, he's called Mr. Ojha. He also lives in a village in Karhal, and he has picked up the Seheria language. Now, Seheria is tribals, and they are primitive, vulnerable tribal groups. So they telecast these small segments wherein they talk about how the Prime Minister has brought in cheetahs, which had gone extinct in India. And this entire segment is in the local dialect. So, they'll call jungle as dang, आप अपने डांग की रक्षा करें, and चीता हमाओ जंगली मित्र है, ठीक है, उससे हानि ना पहुंचाए, and these kind of things. Especially the message is also intended to reach those people who go to graze their animals into the jungles, because these are the people that are the odds of them encountering the cheetah once they're let out in the open in the national park is far more as compared to a village.
And she says that when these people go to the forest to graze their cattle, they usually listen to music and radio on their cell phones. These are the people that the community radio is trying to tap. But besides these efforts by the administration, there are concerns within the community about the arrival of these cheetahs.
So I met villagers who were apprehensive कि नहीं, पहले तो हमको जंगल में नहीं जाने देते थे, अब और नहीं जाने देंगे. So, how will we get our firewood from? And then there were also people there. I spoke to this one teacher called Chandrakant Bhadoria. She was a female, and she used to go to teach in a primary school which only has about 16 odd students. So she was like, there is a proper main road that connects to this particular hamlet, but it's a long route. So I instead take a shorter route, which is through the jungle, and it takes me only about 3 kilometers to reach the school. Now she is apprehensive that, once these cheetahs are out in the wild, and if she happens to encounter them somewhere while she's on her way to teach or go to the school, what will she do? She said, but सरकार की योजना होती है, आप क्या ही कह सकते हैं.
Though besides these fears and apprehension, there is also some hope that this project could lead to more employment for the people. Iram says that when she spoke to people in the region, the lack of jobs was a major concern for them.
People do not have any source of employment there. You can either become a farmer and farm on whatever piece of land you have, or else you have to go in search of jobs. So I met this particular man who said, it was my brother who got one government job as a clerk to a decade ago, and he was the last person to get a government job. Since then, there have been no government vacancies that have come up to which our children could have applied or gotten a job. Our children have to go out to big cities, but since whatever education they have had, it's all in Karhal, their degrees don't get them any kind of good jobs, and whatever jobs they get is not sufficient for them to live there and also send some money back home. So people are hopeful, or they are hoping that with cheetahs back in the jungle, there will be a substantial rise in tourism, with which there will be a lot of hotels coming up. Their children will find good source of employment in their own village, and they will not have to go out to the big cities and be disappointed.
She says that because of this project, land prices have gone up in the area, in some cases up to 5 times. But the problem is that most of these lands are entangled in legal issues.
Because not most of the land, I can easily say that over 95-96% of land in Shiopur is owned by the tribals, given to them by the government on government pattas. And for a hotel to come up, you need to have proper land records for the past 2 to 3 decades. And there are a lot of permissions required. So I don't know if even if the tourism goes up, even if after the quarantine period is ended, the cheetahs are safe in the enclosure and sent out in the wild, and how that will sort of improve tourism. It's all a matter of time, and it's only after a substantial period of time we will actually be in a position to say that things have actually moved and changed for people on ground for better.
You were listening to Three Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.